The Gambler. I am a blackjack dealer at a tribal casino in Oklahoma. I've been a dealer for 13 years. In that time, I've seen some scary people, but none stand out more than this guy. This guy is a scary guy. I'm not easily intimidated. He is about 6'2", medium build, dirty blonde hair, big scar on his cheek, and reeks of Bud Light and Winston cigarettes. He had a wife that always came in with him, and she always seemed to have fallen into something face first. He is a typical redneck asshole. Not only was he mean to his wife, he was hateful to everyone he encountered. One day I was dealing to him and it wasn't going very well. I think I may have taken like $2,000 of his money, and that's when he started in on me, calling me things I wouldn't call my dog. When we encounter verbal abuse, we are allowed to have our pit boss have him removed from the tables. My pit boss is a woman, and he says, "I don't let no woman tell me what to do." As security is walking him off the tables, he looks me dead in the eyes and says, "You better watch your back," and "I'll get my $2,000 back from his ass one way or another." After the altercation, he was banned, but only for 30 days. And sure enough, after the 30 days, he is back in and on my next table. I ask my boss if I can avoid the table because of our past altercation. My boss tells me he'll keep an eye on him, and I will be fine. I get to the table and he just stares me down. I start dealing and he is winning. About 20 minutes into my 30 minutes on the table, he says, "Boy, am I glad you're paying me, because I have a knife in my boot, and I was planning on stabbing your ass." After my 30 minutes was up, I immediately notified my boss what he'd said. Security was notified. They take him to the back, and sure enough, he has an 8-inch Bowie knife in his boot. This time, he was given a lifetime ban. My worst nightmare. One of my biggest fears is someone breaking into my house when I am at home. This fear has involved many sleepless nights, anxiety, and panic attacks. It has taken me a long time to overcome this fear. This fear started when I was 8 years old. My childhood bedroom was the first bedroom you came to when you got to the top of the stairs. The stairs also had one really creaky step. I'd gone to bed like any other night. My parents had also gone to bed and everyone was asleep. This particular night I was awoken by the creaky step. I thought it was one of my parents going downstairs. Being 8 and very nosy, I got out of my bed straight away to see what they were doing. I got to my bedroom door and peered down the stairs, to be greeted by 2 figures halfway up the stairs. Thinking it was both of my parents, I put on the landing light, which was beside my bedroom door, to see what they were doing. When the light came on, I was staring at 2 strangers, a man and a woman, both ill-looking, sunken faces and dirty. The woman was carrying a golf club and the man had a crowbar. As soon as the light came on and my eyes met with the woman's eyes, she let out a quiet chuckle and put her finger to her mouth and motioned for me to shh. Both of them turned around and left the house. Once it all sunk in, I ran into my parents' room to wake them. They had taken a few electronic things and some money, but my fear started because in my mind, they were coming up the stairs with weapons. They were caught and given a 12-month suspended sentence. That was almost 20 years ago. This fear has always been a part of my life, but as I got older, I had to learn to deal with it. However, as of Monday night, this fear has come flooding back. I live on my own and had decided to watch a film downstairs. I must have fallen asleep. As I woke, the film had finished and the TV had gone to standby. Too lazy to go upstairs to bed, I decided to just sleep on the settee. I had left the curtains of my living room open and couldn't be bothered to shut them. Around 3 a.m., I am woken up by shouting in my front garden and my outside light coming on. This was followed by my next door neighbor pushing a man against my living room window. My neighbor shouting, stay inside, call the police." I did this. About 10 minutes later, the police turn up and they arrest the man that was pushed into my window. My neighbor explained that he heard two men talking outside our houses and what sounded like my garden gate opening. When he looked out of his bedroom window, he saw one man with his face pressed against my living room window, trying to get a look, and another man standing at the front door. Instead of ringing the police, my neighbor decided to confront them. He managed to get a hold of the one at the window, and they ended up having a bit of a scuffle before my neighbor slammed him on the window and managed to restrain him. The man at the door ran when he saw my neighbor grab his friend. Wedged in between the plastics of my front door was a screwdriver. Not sure if he was trying to pop the lock or snap the plastics to get in. This is possible on these doors as I have lost my keys and had to get someone to do it for me. But this door was new and not the old damaged one. I am forever grateful for my next door neighbor. The police told me that the man that they had arrested had only been released from prison the following week for burglary and an attempted rape. So thanks to the men for renewing my fears. And any burglars out there, let's not meet again. Update. Firstly, thank you all for the comments and well wishes. Honestly, I could not thank my neighbor enough and will always be thankful that there are still people who are like this. The second guy was caught today. He is also waiting for a court date, but likely going to get off as it was his first offense. I'm getting a security system fitted next week, thinking of getting a dog. Not for the sole purpose of protection. I have always had dogs, but my last one passed away last year. Obviously, none of this will be a solid way of protection, but it'll help calm my nerves. Again, thank you all for reading and your comments.
Stalker picking the lock to my apartment multiple times.
When I was a sophomore in college, I lived in a small but beautiful historic studio apartment in a small East Coast city that had somewhat of a reputation for crime and danger. However, the neighborhood I lived in was usually considered one of the good neighborhoods. It was close to the city's university and was mostly students living there, especially on the street my building was on. My building was a huge 4-story townhouse, if you can really call it that. It was really a mansion as a whole, built in 1895. The architecture was really awesome. built-in bookshelves, and huge mahogany pocket doors that slid into the walls. Anyway, the building wasn't exactly in mint condition, and my landlord was pretty lazy. He would always come by and check up on things and make promises to get stuff fixed, but never really got around to doing much of anything. The apartment I was renting was on the first floor. My front door immediately on the left as you walked in the building's door to the street. This door, the building's front door, which from the street opened to a small lobby area with only one door in it, mine, and a staircase to the other apartments upstairs, was huge and heavy and never locked. In fact, you couldn't lock it, and in fact, it didn't even close all the way. So basically, the door to my apartment was open to the street. I asked my landlord countless times to please do something about the front door, but he never did anything. Well, one night I was getting home from work and it was very late, about 3:45 a.m. I worked as a pizza delivery driver at a place that was open really late every night. And I was just sitting on my couch watching a little TV before I went to bed. I had also gotten totally naked, something I truly loved being able to do considering I lived alone. Anyway, not 10 minutes since I'd gotten home and sat down, I hear 3 slow knocks at my door. I'm thinking, who the fuck would be at my door at this hour? What could they possibly want? Why didn't I hear the building's front door open like I normally do? Young and naive, I was half scared and half intrigued. I put a robe on and slowly crept towards the door, which by the way was literally right next to the couch where I was sitting. At this point in time, my door didn't have a peephole, so I just had to kind of take a leap of faith and open the door. And when I did, a tall, emaciated, middle-aged man stood staring down at me with low eyes and a grin. He was wearing all black, many layers, and a big black trench coat. The first thing he said was, "Can I come in?" With the door barely open, I got a deep pit in my stomach and just went, no man, what's up?" He just stared into my eyes for a second, clearly disappointed, and then said, "I've seen you around," and started to grin again. The pit in my stomach had evolved into a churning sensation and I was starting to get nauseous. "Yeah, I've been watching you, and I like the way you look," he said. "So you gay? Bisexual?" I was just like, "I don't know, but it's late and I'm going to bed. Bye." He kind of nodded and lingered for a second, as did I, watching to make sure I saw him leave the building. And once I did, I closed the door, locked it, and stood with my hands still on the knob for a good minute at least. After I snapped out of my shock, I ran over to my couch and pushed it up against the door. I ended up sleeping on the couch that night, even though it was right there. It just made me feel safer, like I could hear if something happened. Well, nothing happened that night. It wasn't until about a week later, on one of my nights off from work, that I was sitting around my apartment winding down by myself after I had had some friends over drinking and smoking a little bit, as college kids will do. All of a sudden, I hear a weird rattling noise coming from across the room, so I turn off the music I was playing to find out that it was coming from none other than my front doorknob. I looked at it for a second and saw that both the knob and the top lock were jiggling. Someone was trying to get in. Like a deer in headlights, I was frozen staring at the things wiggle and shake until I started to see the top lock actually budge and start to turn. I leapt up from my chair and soared to the door, grabbing tightly on the lock and forcefully twisting it back to being locked. The jingling of the lock and knob stopped for a second because whoever it was clearly knew now that I knew. It was only a second though before they just started struggling again, and I had to use all my might just to keep it still. Sweat was dripping down my forehead and my rib cage, and after about 15 seconds of wrestling with this intruder, it suddenly stopped, and I heard the building door open and close, and footsteps run down the stairs of the stoop to the sidewalk. Just like I was before, I was paralyzed with my hands on the door for a good while before I realized I was crying and shaking and that I needed to call someone. My instinct was to call the police. In hindsight, I regret this for the following reasons. I was having basically a panic attack while I was on the phone with 911 and actually threw up during the call. And I think that's when they decided I was just fucked up or something. When the two police got to my apartment, they stood in my doorway as I struggled to recount to them what had happened, as I'm shaking and crying. I noticed at one point they're both smirking and laughing, and I say, "What's funny right now?" And one of them goes, "It reeks of marijuana." I was just like, okay, and basically argued with them after that. Long story short, they ended up confiscating a bunch of my shit from my apartment and basically turning the whole situation into a little mini drug bust. Although they said they weren't going to charge me with anything, just take my shit. Nothing about this attempted break-in besides, keep your doors locked. I was devastated and felt so helpless. I hate to make this story so long, so I'll try to keep this last part short. Basically, this same scenario happened one more time about 2 weeks from the last time. Only instead of calling the police, I called my dad, who raced down in an hour, 2-hour drive from his place to this place, with a crowbar up his sleeve. Unfortunately, by the time he'd gotten there, whoever it was had already left. They didn't struggle very hard this time. My dad ended up cussing out my landlord and demanding he get the door fixed and install a new lock and a peephole on my door. He did make this happen within a reasonable amount of time, and I also got one of those bars you wedge between the doorknob and the floor, as well as an aluminum baseball bat to protect myself with, so I felt a lot better from then on. Needless to say though, I ended my lease for that apartment a month early and never moved back to that street. I never found out for sure who was trying to pick my locks and if it was the guy who would come to my door the first time, but whoever it was, let's not meet. Too long, didn't read. Creepy guy comes to my apartment where I live alone, tells me he's been watching me. Shortly after, the lock to my apartment is attempted to be picked, unsuccessfully, on 2 separate occasions, although neither time was anybody seen or caught by me.